I needed the job badly enough that the interview didn't matter. The Regional Water Authority posted the listing on a Tuesday, and by Thursday I was driving north along Route 47 with a duffel bag and a folder of signed forms I hadn't read closely. The pay was triple what I'd made at the warehouse, and the supervisor, a man named Carver who spoke in clipped half-sentences over the phone, said housing was included. I owed money to people who'd stopped being polite about it 3 months ago. The math was simple. The lock sat 23 miles upriver from the nearest real town, accessible only by a maintenance road that turned from asphalt to gravel to packed dirt over the course of 4 miles. I passed the turnoff twice before I spotted the faded sign, "Authority Personnel Only." The trees closed in tight on both sides, birch and cedar mostly, with patches of standing water visible between the trunks. It was October, and the afternoon light came in slanted and weak. The lockhouse appeared suddenly where the road ended, a 2-story structure of poured concrete and narrow windows painted a green that had faded to gray-green over decades. A diesel generator hummed somewhere behind it. The river itself was wider than I'd expected, maybe 60 yards across, the water dark and smooth except where it broke over the upstream dam. The lock chamber sat between 2 massive gates, both closed, the concrete walls stained with water lines that marked decades of rise and fall. Carver was waiting on the access platform, a thin man in his 60s wearing a water authority jacket and work boots that had been resoled multiple times. He didn't offer his hand. "Your march," he said. "Yes, sir." "Drove up from Millston?" "That's right." He turned and walked toward the lockhouse without checking if I followed. I grabbed my bag and caught up. The platform was metal grating, and I could see the water 20 feet below through the gaps. Something about the depth of it, the way the current moved underneath, made me watch my footing carefully. Inside, the lockhouse was warmer than I'd expected. The ground floor was mostly one large room, a control station with panels of switches and indicator lights, a radio console, a desk covered in clipboards and binders, a kitchenette with a hot plate and a small refrigerator, and a table with 2 chairs. A narrow staircase led up to what I assumed were the sleeping quarters. Everything was clean but worn, the kind of functional space that hadn't changed much in 30 years. "You'll work the midnight shift," Carver said, setting a key ring on the desk. 7 keys, each labeled with faded tape. 6 days on, 2 days off, midnight to 8 a.m. I cover days. There's a relief operator for weekends, but you won't meet him yet. What about training? I'll show you the board and the procedures. You'll shadow me for 3 nights starting tonight, then you're on your own." He opened one of the binders and flipped through laminated pages. Commercial traffic is rare this time of year. Mostly you're monitoring water levels, running the generator check at 0400 and logging readings every hour. I set my bag down near the stairs. "Sounds straightforward. It is if you follow the procedures exactly." He looked at me directly for the first time. "The work is simple. The job is different." "I'm not sure I follow." Carver pulled a single sheet of paper from the desk drawer and placed it in front of me. The paper was newer than the binders, printed on standard copy paper, but the text looked like it had been typed on an actual typewriter. "There's one rule," he said. "Everything else is procedure. This is the rule." I read it. If the upstream gate opens on its own between midnight and 6 a.m., do not close it. Monitor the water level. If the level rises more than 6 inches above the normal operating range, radio the emergency line and evacuate to your vehicle. Do not attempt to override the gate mechanism. Do not enter the lock chamber for any reason until after sunrise. I read it twice more. "The gate opens on its own," I said. "Sometimes, not every night, maybe once a week, maybe less. You'll hear it, the hydraulics are loud." Carver tapped the paper. "When it happens, you log it, you watch the level gauge, and you wait. That's the entire job on those nights." "What causes it?" Hydraulic pressure variance, electrical fault, temperature differential. He shrugged. Engineers have been out here 4 times in 3 years. They file reports. The gate still opens. And if the water level rises? It hasn't in 16 months, but you still check. He collected the paper and placed it back in the drawer. Everything else, the generator, the logs, the radio checks, those are procedures. You can learn procedures. The rule is different. The rule is absolute. I wanted to ask more, but something in his tone suggested the conversation was finished. He spent the next hour walking me through the control board. Circuit breakers labeled in faded marker, a depth gauge with a needle that swayed gently. A bank of toggle switches for the exterior lights. He showed me the radio protocols, the log format, the generator shed key. He opened the refrigerator and showed me where to store the meal provisions that came up twice a week with the supply truck. Upstairs is a bunk, a bathroom, and a locker, he said. You sleep during the day if you need to. There's no phone line, but the radio reaches the district office if you need something. What about the relief operator? He works Fridays and Saturdays, so you can have a weekend. You'll meet him eventually. Carver checked his watch. I'm finishing the day shift. Be back here at 11:30 tonight. Bring a book or something. Most nights are quiet. He left through the main door, and I heard his truck start up a moment later. I stood in the lockhouse alone, listening to the generator hum and the faint sound of water moving through the dam upstream. The October light was already fading. I climbed the narrow stairs. The second floor was exactly as described. A single room with a metal frame bed, a locker, a bathroom with a rust-stained sink. A window faced east toward the river. I unpacked my bag into the locker, 5 changes of clothes, toiletries, a flashlight, a paperback I'd been meaning to finish for 2 months. The room smelled like concrete and old wool. I walked back downstairs and outside onto the platform. The lock gates were enormous up close. Steel painted green, riveted in patterns that suggested they'd been fabricated in sections and assembled on site. The chamber itself was empty, the floor slick with algae and dried silt. I could see the downstream gate from where I stood, identical to the upstream gate, both closed tight. The forest pressed in on 3 sides. The maintenance road disappeared into it. No other buildings were visible. The nearest neighbor, Carver had mentioned during the drive-through, was 11 miles south. I checked my watch, 4:47 p.m. 6 hours and 43 minutes until my shift started. I went back inside, made coffee on the hot plate, and started reading the binders. At 11:28 that night, I parked my car near the lockhouse and walked across the platform carrying a thermos and the paperback. The exterior lights were on, casting hard white light across the chamber and the access areas. The generator sounded louder at night. Carver was inside, filling out a log sheet. He glanced up. You read the binders? Most of them. Got through the operations manual and the maintenance schedules. Good. Tonight you'll watch me do the shift routine. Ask questions if you need to. He clipped the log sheet to a board and hung it on a hook near the control panel. First thing, visual inspection. We walk the perimeter, check the seals on both gates, verify the exterior lights. Takes 12 minutes if you don't rush it. We went outside. The night was cold, maybe 40 degrees, and the sky was clear enough to see stars between the branches. Carver moved methodically, checking each light fixture, running his hand along the gate seals, looking down into the chamber from multiple angles. He counted his steps between checkpoints. I heard him mutter numbers under his breath. At the upstream gate, he stopped and placed his palm flat against the steel. You feel that? He asked. I put my hand on the gate, a faint vibration, rhythmic. The dam, Carver said. Water going over the spillway. You'll feel it stronger some nights, weaker others. Depends on the flow rate. He moved to the hydraulic housing mounted on the side of the gate and inspected the pressure gauge. 62 psi. Normal range is 58 to 66. Log it when we get back inside. We completed the circuit and returned to the lockhouse. Carver showed me how to log the inspection. Date, time, gate status, pressure reading, notes. His handwriting was precise, each letter identical to the last. Every hour you log the depth gauge and the generator status, he said. Every 4 hours you walk the perimeter again. At 0400 you go out to the generator shed and run the test sequence that's in the manual, page 18. It takes 6 minutes. You log the voltage and fuel level. What if commercial traffic comes through? At night? He shook his head. Hasn't happened in 3 years. If it does, you radio the district office first, then follow the lockage procedure in the binder. But it won't happen. We sat in the chairs by the control board. Carver poured coffee from his own thermos. The lockhouse was quiet except for the hum of the generator and the occasional tick of the depth gauge needle adjusting. "Tell me about the rule," I said. Carver was silent for a moment. "You read it. I read it. I'm asking what actually happens. What happens is the upstream gate opens. Hydraulics engage, the gate swings wide. You hear it sounds like a truck air brake, then a long mechanical groan. Takes about 90 seconds for the gate to reach full open. How often? Once a week, sometimes less. Twice a week if the weather's been strange." He sipped his coffee. "You don't touch the controls when it happens. You don't go outside. You sit here and you watch the depth gauge. If the needle climbs more than 6 inches past the red line, you call it in and you leave. Has it ever climbed that high? Not while I've been here. How long is that? 9 years. I tried to process that. So the gate opens, you watch the gauge, and then what? The gate closes on its own, usually takes an hour, sometimes 2. By morning, everything's normal." He set his coffee down. "The rule exists because someone broke it once, before my time. Tried to manually close the gate during an event. They found his car in the parking area 3 days later. Never found him. Jesus. The authority investigated, new procedures, new signage, new rule. One rule." Carver stood and walked to the control board. "You asked what actually happens. That's what happens. Gate opens, you wait. Gate closes. Simple. Doesn't feel simple. It's simple if you let it be." The rest of the night passed in a rhythm. Log the gauge, walk the perimeter, sit and wait. Carver showed me the radio protocols at 0200, the correct channel and the 3-word check-in format. At 0400 we walked together to the generator shed, a concrete bunker 30 yards from the lockhouse, and he walked me through the test sequence. The generator was a decades-old diesel unit, loud and hot, its gauges mechanical and precise. We logged the readings and walked back. At 0530, Carver stood and stretched. "Gate's not opening tonight," he said. "You get lucky sometimes." "What does it look like when it does?" "You'll know. Come back tomorrow night, same time." He left. I stayed until 8 a.m., logging the final readings and completing the last perimeter check. The sun was rising over the trees, turning the river orange. I locked the lockhouse and drove back to the room I'd rented in town, a boarding house that charged by the week. I slept until mid-afternoon, woke up, ate, and read the rest of the operations manual. At 11:20, I drove back to the lock. The second night was nearly identical to the first. Carver walked me through the shift change checklist, the perimeter inspection, the hourly logs. We sat in the lockhouse and drank coffee and said little. At 0214, he stood suddenly and held up one hand. "Listen." I heard it a few seconds later. A deep pneumatic hiss, then a mechanical groan that sounded like it was coming from the upstream gate. The sound grew louder, a rhythmic grinding of metal on metal, punctuated by hydraulic releases. Carver walked to the window that faced the upstream side. I followed. The gate was opening, The massive steel barrier was swinging slowly outward, pulled by hydraulics that should have been disengaged. The mechanism housing shuddered with each increment of movement. Carver checked his watch. 0216, log it. I went to the desk and wrote in the log. Gate event, 2:16 a.m. Upstream gate opening. Now watch the gauge, Carver said. I turned to the depth gauge on the control board. The needle sat at 42 inches, well within the green zone. Normal operating range was 38 to 46 inches. The red line started at 52 inches. The gate continued to open. The groaning sound peaked and then settled into a steady mechanical rumble. Outside, I could see the gate was now fully extended. The lock chamber opened to the river upstream. Water flowed in dark and smooth. Needle's steady, I said. It'll stay that way, just watch. Carver sat in his chair, calm. This is the entire event. Gate opens, water flows, nothing changes. In an hour or two, the gate will close itself. You log the close time when it happens. And if the needle moves, it won't. But if it does, if it goes past 52, you radio the district office on Channel 9 and you say Lock 17 evacuation protocol. Then you leave. That's it. That's it. We sat and watched. The needle didn't move. At 0301, the groaning sound started again, this time in reverse. The gate began to close. Carver checked his watch and nodded. 45 minutes open, shorter than usual. By 0314, the gate was fully closed. The lock chamber was still, the water level unchanged. Carver logged the close time and stood. That's the rule, he said. You see now? I see. Tomorrow night you'll do it alone. I'll be upstairs, but you'll handle the shift. If the gate opens, you follow the rule. If it doesn't, you follow the procedures. Understood. The rest of the shift was routine. At 8 a.m., Carver left and I stayed an extra 20 minutes, rereading the rule sheet in the desk drawer. The language was simple, the instructions clear. I tried to imagine the person who'd broken it, who'd gone outside during a gate event and disappeared. The authority had filed reports. Engineers had investigated. I locked the lockhouse and drove back to town. The third night I arrived at 11:26 and found Carver waiting outside on the platform. He handed me the keyring. You're running the shift, he said. I'll be upstairs. Radio me if you need something, but you won't need something. What if the gate opens? Then you follow the rule. He turned toward the door. You've seen it. You know what to do. He went inside and climbed the stairs. I heard the upstairs door close. I stood alone on the platform. The exterior lights cast everything in white and shadow. The river moved past, smooth and quiet. I checked my watch. 11:29, 31 minutes until midnight. I went inside and started the shift checklist. Visual inspection first. I walked the perimeter, checked the seals, verified the lights. 61 psi on the upstream gate. Both gates closed and secure. I logged everything, my handwriting careful and clear. At midnight, I made coffee and sat by the control board. The depth gauge read 41 inches. The generator hummed. I opened my paperback and read 3 pages before I realized I hadn't absorbed a single word. The first hour passed. I logged the gauge at 0100, 42 inches. I walked the perimeter at 0200, everything normal. At 0247, I heard the sound, the pneumatic hiss, then the groan. I stood and walked to the window. The upstream gate was opening. I logged it. Gate event, 2:47 a.m. I watched the depth gauge. The needle sat at 43 inches steady. The gate continued to open, the mechanical rumble filling the lockhouse. I wanted to go outside to see it up close, but the rule was clear. I stayed inside. The gate reached full open at 02:59. 12 minutes. I logged it. The needle stayed at 43 inches. I sat in the chair and watched. The rule said to monitor the water level. I monitored. The needle didn't move. Outside, the river flowed into the open chamber, but the level stayed constant. I tried to understand the hydraulics inflow balanced by outflow, pressure equalized, but I wasn't an engineer. At 03:32, the gate began to close. I logged it. By 03:46, the gate was secure. I completed the rest of the shift according to procedure. Generator check at 0400, perimeter walk at 0600, logs every hour. At 8 a.m., Carver came downstairs, looked at the log sheet, and nodded. "Gate opened," he said. "Yes, sir. Stayed open 43 minutes. Depth never changed." "Good. You're on your own starting tomorrow." He took the key ring and set it back on the desk. "You have any questions?" "Just one. Why does the rule specify midnight to 6 a.m.? Carver looked at me. "Because the gate only opens during those hours. Never seen it happen outside that window." "In 9 years?" "In 9 years." He left. I stayed and reread the rule one more time before locking up. I worked the next 6 nights alone. The routine settled into my body. Arrive at 11:30, visual inspection, logs every hour, perimeter walks every 4 hours, generator check at 0400. The work was exactly as simple as Carver had described. Most nights I read, drank coffee, and watched the depth gauge needle sway gently in its housing. The gate opened twice during that first week solo. Once on the second night at 01:23, staying open for 56 minutes. Once on the fifth night at 04:08, staying open for only 31 minutes. Both times I followed the rule, logged the event, watched the gauge, waited. The needle never moved past 44 inches. On my first 2 days off, I drove into town and paid some of what I owed. The money was good. The work was strange but manageable. I bought groceries, did laundry, slept 10 hours straight. When I returned for my second week, I found a note taped to the lockhouse door. Carver called in sick. Relief operator unavailable. You're covering days. Fry sat district office aware. The note was signed by someone named Halford. I worked a double shift that Friday midnight to 8 a.m., then stayed through the day until the evening operator arrived at 6 p.m. The day shift was different. Occasional radio chatter, a supply truck at 11 a.m., sunlight that made the lockhouse feel almost normal. No gate events during daylight. The procedures were identical. Saturday I covered another double. The evening operator, a man named Porter who didn't speak much, relieved me at 6 p.m. I drove back to town and slept 12 hours. By the third week, the rhythm was automatic. I knew which floorboards creaked in the lockhouse, which lights flickered before they stabilized. The exact sound the generator made when it was running lean versus rich. I knew the depth gauge needle drifted left when the temperature dropped, right when it warmed. I knew the upstream gate opened, on average twice per week, almost always between 0200 and 0400. The rule remained absolute. I never touched the controls during a gate event. I never went outside. I watched the gauge and I waited. On a Tuesday in early November, the gate opened at 03:12 and stayed open for 91 minutes. Longer than I'd seen before. The needle crept to 45 inches, then 46, then held there. Still within normal range, but close to the red line. I watched it for the entire event, my hand near the radio, ready. At 04:43, the gate closed. The needle drifted back to 43 inches. I logged it and completed the shift. When Carver arrived at 8 a.m., I showed him the log. 91 minutes, he said. That's unusual. Needle got to 46 inches. Still normal range. He set the clipboard down. You did right. Watched and waited. What if it had gone to 52? Then you'd have radioed and evacuated, but it didn't. He poured coffee from his thermos. The rule accounts for the possibility, that's why it exists. Has the needle ever gone into the red? Not while I've been here. I wanted to ask what he thought would happen if it did, but I knew he wouldn't speculate. Carver dealt in procedures, not theories. "You're doing good work," he said. "District office is pleased." I nodded and left. In mid-November, the weather turned. Freezing rain, then sleet, then snow that didn't stick. The temperature dropped into the 20s at night. The river kept flowing, dark water steaming in the cold air. The gate opened 3 times that week. On Thursday night, it opened at 02:06 and stayed open for 103 minutes. The needle climbed to 47 inches. I watched it, counted the minutes, logged everything. The gate closed at 03:49. I radioed the district office at 0400 during the standard check-in. Lock 17, routine check-in, all normal. Copy Lock 17, gate event tonight? Affirmative. Opened 02:06, closed 03:49, peak depth 47 inches. There was a pause. Copy that, stay alert. The radio clicked off. At 8 a.m., Carver looked at the logs and frowned. 47 inches, he said. Yes, sir. That's close. Still 5 inches below the red line. 5 inches is less than you think when the water's moving. He tapped the log sheet. Watch it carefully. If we get a few more like this, I'll call the engineers. What will they do? File a report, same as always. I drove back to town thinking about 5 inches, about how fast water could rise, about the rule and what it was protecting against. The next week was quiet. The gate opened only once, briefly for 28 minutes. The needle stayed at 42 inches throughout. I started to relax into the routine again. Then, on a Friday in late November, everything changed. I arrived at 11:30 to find a truck parked near the lock house, a water authority vehicle I didn't recognize. Inside, Carver was talking to a younger man in a similar jacket. The man was maybe 30, lean with nervous hands that kept adjusting his collar. "This is Kyle," Carver said, "and he's training as a relief operator. He'll shadow you tonight." Kyle nodded. "Good to meet you." "Likewise." I set my thermos down. "You worked locks before?" "No. I've been doing dam inspections downriver. They're moving me into operations." He glanced at Carver. "I've read the manual." "Manual's a start," Carver said. "Tonight you'll watch March do the shift, ask questions, learn the rhythm." He looked at me. "Walk him through everything. If the gate opens, explain the rule." "Understood." Carver left. Kyle and I started the visual inspection together. I showed him the perimeter route, the checkpoints, how to read the pressure gauge on the gate housing. He took notes in a small spiral notebook. "You've been here a few months?" he asked. 2.5. "You like it?" "It's work. Pays well." Carver mentioned a rule, something about the gate. We were standing near the upstream gate. I could feel the faint vibration through the steel. "There's one rule, the rest is procedure. I'll show you the rule inside." Back in the lock house, I pulled the sheet from the desk drawer and handed it to him. He read it slowly. "The gate opens on its own," he said. "Sometimes, once or twice a week." "And you just wait?" "You monitor the water level. If it rises too much, you evacuate. Otherwise, you wait." "What happens if you don't wait? If you try to close it?" "Someone did that once. They didn't find him." Kyle looked at the paper again. "Jesus." "It's simple," I said. "Gate opens, you watch the gauge, you wait. That's the entire job on those nights." We sat in the chairs. I walked him through the log format, the radio protocols, the hourly checks. He asked good questions, wrote everything down. At 0100, I logged the depth gauge and showed him how the needle drifted. At 0237, the gate opened. Kyle stood immediately. That's it. Log the time." He wrote in the log while I watched the depth gauge. 42 inches. The gate groaned open, the hydraulics loud in the night. Kyle walked to the window. "Should we go look?" "No. Rule says stay inside. Watch the gauge." He returned to the chair, his hands fidgeting with his notebook. The gate reached full open. The needle stayed at 42 inches. "Now we wait," I said. "For how long?" "Until it closes, usually an hour or two." We sat in silence. Kyle kept glancing at the window, at the gauge, at his watch. I understood I'd been the same way my first few times. The waiting felt wrong, passive, but the rule was clear. At 03:19, the gate began to close. Kyle logged it. By 03:34, the gate was secure. "That's it?" Kyle asked. "That's it. And that happens twice a week?" "On average." He looked at his notes. "Why doesn't the authority fix it, if it's a mechanical fault? Engineers have been out. Multiple times they file reports. Gate still opens. That doesn't make sense. Doesn't have to make sense. You just follow the rule." The rest of the shift was routine. At 8 a.m., Carver arrived and asked Kyle if he had questions. "It seems straightforward," Kyle said, "as long as you follow the procedures." "And the rule," Carver said, "and the rule." "Good. You'll shadow march for 3 more nights, then you'll cover weekend relief starting next month." Kyle left. I showed Carver the logs, the gate event, the times, the steady depth. He nodded, and I drove back to town. Kyle shadowed me for 3 more nights. The gate opened once more during that time. On the third night at 04:12, Kyle was calmer about it, logging the event and watching the gauge without much commentary. The needle reached 44 inches and held. The gate closed after 52 minutes. On his last night of training, as we sat waiting for the end of shift, Kyle asked, "What do you think opens it?" "Hydraulic fault, electrical issue, temperature differential." Carver said that too, but you've seen it enough times now. What do you actually think? I considered the question. I think something opens it. I think the engineers can't figure out what, and I think the rule exists because trying to interfere is dangerous. Dangerous how? Someone disappeared trying. But why? What's dangerous about manually closing a gate? I don't know, and I don't need to know. I just follow the rule. Kyle was quiet for a moment. That doesn't bother you? Not knowing? No. It bothers me. Then you'll have to make peace with it because the authority doesn't explain, they just enforce the rule. At 8 a.m., Carver arrived and signed off on Kyle's training log. Kyle would start weekend relief in December. He shook my hand before leaving. "Thanks for the training," he said. "Just follow the rule. Everything else is easy." The first week of December brought a cold snap. Temperatures dropped below 0 at night. The river steamed constantly. Vapor rising off the dark water. Ice formed along the edges of the lock chamber, thin and jagged. The gate opened 4 times that week. The longest event lasted 107 minutes. The needle climbed to 48 inches and held there for 31 minutes before the gate closed and the level dropped. I radioed the district office during the 0400 check-in. Lock 17 routine check-in, gate event tonight, peak depth 48 inches. Copy. That's the 3rd high-depth event this month. 4th, actually. Stand by. The radio was silent for 2 minutes. Then a different voice came through, older and more formal. Lock 17. This is District Supervisor Halford. Acknowledge. Lock 17 acknowledging. We're aware of the increased gate activity and elevated depth readings. Engineering team is scheduled for a site visit next week. Continue standard monitoring. If depth exceeds 50 inches, follow evacuation protocol immediately. Understood. Will depth of 50 inches trigger automatic evacuation, or should I assess conditions first? 50 inches or above triggers automatic evacuation, no assessment. Immediate radio contact and departure. Copy that. Halford out. The radio clicked off. I logged the conversation and completed the shift. When Carver arrived, I showed him the logs and told him about the radio contact. Engineers coming next week, he said. Good. Maybe they'll actually find something this time. What if they don't? Then we keep following the rule. The engineers arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. 2 men and a woman, all wearing authority jackets and carrying equipment cases. They spent 4 hours inspecting the gate mechanism, running tests, measuring pressure and voltage. I watched from the lockhouse while they worked. They came inside at 6 p.m. and asked to see the logs. I showed them 3 months of records, every gate event, every depth reading, every timestamp. The woman, her ID badge said Marchetti studied the logs carefully. You've had 16 events in the past month. That's double the historical average. Yes, ma'am. And 4 of those events exceeded 47 inches of depth. Yes, ma'am. But none exceeded 50 inches. Correct? She exchanged glances with her colleagues. We've tested everything. Hydraulic pressure, electrical systems, gate alignment, everything is within normal parameters. So what's causing it? We don't know. The system shouldn't be opening on its own. There's no mechanical reason for it. She closed the binder. We're going to recommend installing additional monitoring equipment, pressure sensors, flow meters. Maybe we can identify a pattern. And in the meantime, you follow existing protocols. If depth exceeds 50 inches, evacuate immediately. They left before sunset. I started my shift at midnight and the night passed quietly. No gate events. The depth gauge stayed at 41 inches. Kyle started his weekend relief shifts in mid-December. I met him at the lockhouse on a Friday night to hand over the shift. He looked nervous but ready. Any gate events this week? He asked. Tuesday night, 37 minutes, depth held at 43 inches, nothing unusual. What if it happens tonight? Then you follow the rule. Log it, watch the gauge, wait. And if the gauge goes to 50? Radio the district office and evacuate, but it won't. How do you know? Because in 2.5 months it hasn't. Engineers think the system self-regulates somehow. I handed him the key ring. You'll be fine. Just follow the procedures. I left him alone and drove back to town for my 2 days off. When I returned Sunday night, Kyle was waiting to hand back the keys. He looked tired. How was it? I asked. Quiet, no gate events, just the usual logs and checks. He paused. It's strange being out here alone at night. You get used to it. Do you? I didn't answer. He left and I started my shift. On December 23rd, the gate opened at 01:47 and stayed open for 133 minutes. The longest event I'd seen. The needle climbed to 49 inches, holding there for almost an hour before the gate finally closed at 0400. 1 inch below evacuation threshold. I radioed the district office at 0415. Lock 17, urgent check-in, gate event tonight, peak depth 49 inches. Copy, Lock 17, duration 133 minutes, gate opened 01:47, closed 0400. There was a long pause. Stand by for Supervisor Halford. The radio clicked. Then, Lock 17, this is Halford. Confirm peak depth 49 inches. Confirmed. And current depth? I checked the gauge. 42 inches, return to normal range. Copy, we're escalating this to regional engineering. Expect contact within 24 hours. If you experience another gate event before then and depth reaches 50 inches, evacuate immediately. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Evacuate at 50 inches. Halford out. I logged everything and completed the shift. Carver arrived at 8 a.m. and read the logs twice. 49 inches, he said quietly. Yes, sir. That's too close. Gate closed on its own. System seems stable now. Seems isn't good enough. He picked up the radio handset. I'm calling Halford directly. I left while he was on the radio. I didn't work again until after Christmas. When I returned on December 27th, I found new equipment in the lockhouse. A digital depth monitor with an alarm system, wired to both the gauge and a separate pressure sensor. A printed instruction sheet was taped to the wall next to it. Digital depth monitor operating instructions. The monitor displays real-time depth readings and is calibrated to trigger an audio alarm if depth exceeds 49.5 inches. The alarm cannot be disabled manually. If the alarm sounds, 1. Radio the district office immediately on channel 9. Evacuate to your vehicle. Do not attempt to override gate controls. Wait for further instructions. I tested the monitor. The display read 41.2 inches, matching the analog gauge. The alarm test button produced a loud, piercing tone. Carver arrived at 11:45. "You saw the new equipment," he said. "Yes, sir." "When was it installed?" "Yesterday. Regional Engineering ordered it after your report. They're taking this seriously." "Has the gate opened since Tuesday?" "Once. Christmas Eve. Stayed open 41 minutes. Depth never exceeded 44 inches. He pointed to the monitor. "That alarm goes off, you leave. No waiting, no assessment, just radio and go." "Understood." "Good. I mean it, March. 1 inch is nothing when water's moving." He left. I started my shift. The gate didn't open that night or the next 3 nights. The depth stayed steady between 41 and 43 inches. The new monitor hummed quietly, its display glowing green. On New Year's Eve, I worked alone. The lockhouse was cold despite the heater running. Outside, the temperature was 6 degrees below zero. Ice covered the edges of the lock chamber, thicker than I'd seen before. At 02:23, the gate opened. I logged it and watched both gauges. The analog needle started at 42 inches. The digital display read 42.1 inches. The gate groaned fully open. Hydraulics straining in the cold. The needle began to climb. 43 inches, 44. The digital display updated every few seconds. 44.3, 44.6, 44.9. The gate stayed open 45 inches, 46. I kept my hand near the radio. 47 inches. The digital display read 47.2. I checked my watch. The gate had been open for 18 minutes. Usually by now it would be starting to close. 48 inches, 48.4 on the monitor. I picked up the radio handset but didn't transmit yet. The rule said evacuate at 50 inches, not before. 49 inches, 49.1. My heart was hammering. The alarm threshold was 49.5. I stood and moved toward the door, keeping my eyes on the display. 49.3 inches, 49.4 inches. The gate groaned. The hydraulics engaged in reverse. The gate was closing. I exhaled and sat back down. The display held at 49.4 for 30 seconds, then began to drop. 49.2, 49.0, 48.7. The gate continued closing. By 02:55 it was secure. The depth had dropped to 43.8 inches. I logged everything with shaking hands. Then I radioed the district office. Lock 17, urgent check-in. Gate event tonight, peak depth 49.4 inches. Copy, Lock 17. Stand by for Halford. The radio clicked. Lock 17, this is Halford. Confirmed depth 49.4. Confirmed. Digital monitor shows 49.4. Gate closed at 02:55. Duration of event? 32 minutes. Current depth? 43.8 inches, stable. There was a long pause. Copy that. Regional Engineering will be on site tomorrow. Do not operate the lock for any commercial traffic until they've completed their inspection. Acknowledge. Acknowledged. And march if it happens again tonight. Anything over 49, you leave. Don't wait for 50. Understood? Understood. Halford out. I completed the rest of the shift in a state of high alert, checking the gauges every 5 minutes. The gate didn't open again. At 8 a.m., Carver arrived with 2 engineers I didn't recognize. "You had another high-depth event," Carver said. "Yes, sir. 49.4 inches, 32 minutes. One of the engineers, a tall man named Kowalski, examined the logs. "This is the 5th time in 6 weeks you've exceeded 47 inches. The pattern is escalating." What's causing it? We still don't know. But we're going to install an automatic shut-off system. If depth hits 50 inches, it'll trigger an emergency override that should force the gate closed. Should? We can't test it without reproducing the conditions that cause the gate to open on its own, and we can't reproduce those conditions because we don't understand them. He closed the log binder. The override is a fail-safe. Hopefully you'll never need it. They spent the morning installing new equipment, a control box wired to the gate hydraulics, a second alarm system, additional sensors. By noon, the lock house had twice as much monitoring equipment as before. Kowalski showed me the override switch protected by a hinged plastic cover. If depth hits 50 inches and the gate hasn't closed on its own, you flip this switch. It'll force the hydraulics to full reverse. But only use it as a last resort. Why last resort? Because forcing the hydraulics when the system is malfunctioning could cause structural damage. The gate might not seal properly afterward. It's an emergency measure only. Understood. They left at 2 p.m. I slept until 10 p.m., then drove back to the lock for my midnight shift. The month of January was brutal. Temperatures stayed below freezing for 2 straight weeks. The river kept flowing, but ice built up along the banks and in the eddies behind the downstream gate. The gate opened 11 times that month. 7 of those events exceeded 47 inches. 3 exceeded 49 inches. The alarm never triggered, but twice I came within 1/10 of an inch. I stopped sleeping well on my days off. I'd wake up thinking I heard the hydraulic groan, reaching for a radio that wasn't there. Kyle covered weekends and reported similar patterns. One Saturday night, the gate opened twice. Once at 01:30 and again at 04:45. Both events exceeded 48 inches. Carver filed weekly reports to the district office. Engineering teams visited 3 more times. They installed additional sensors, recalibrated the hydraulics, inspected every component of the gate mechanism. Nothing changed. It's like the system has its own logic, Kowalski said during his 4th visit. It opens when it wants to, stays open as long as it wants to, then closes. We can't find any external trigger, no temperature threshold, no pressure differential, no electrical anomaly. It just happens. So what do we do? I asked. You keep following the rule. And you use the override if you have to. On February 9th at 03:17, the gate opened and the depth climbed to 49.8 inches, 2/10 below the alarm threshold. I stood by the override switch, my hand on the plastic cover, ready to flip it. The gate stayed open for 47 minutes. The needle hovered at 49.8 the entire time. Then the gate closed on its own. I radioed Halford. "This can't continue," he said. "We're going to shut down the lock for a full system overhaul. 2 weeks starting next month. We'll drain the chamber, inspect everything from the foundation up. And if that doesn't fix it, then we'll deal with it then." The shutdown was scheduled for March. Until then, I kept working midnight shifts and following the rule. In late February, Kyle asked to meet me before his weekend shift. We sat in the lock house on a Friday evening while Carver finished the day shift paperwork. "I need to tell you something," Kyle said. "Something happened last weekend." "What happened?" "The gate opened Saturday night. Standard event depth got to 47 inches, but while it was open, I heard something outside." "What kind of something?" "Voices calling from the lock chamber." I looked at Carver. He'd stopped writing. "What did the voices say?" I asked. "My name. They called my name. Multiple voices, like a group of people." Kyle's hands were shaking slightly. "I almost went outside. I had my hand on the door." "But you didn't go outside." "No, I remembered the rule. Stay inside, watch the gauge, so I did. But the voices kept calling for maybe 10 minutes, then they stopped." Carver set his pen down. "You followed the rule. That's all that matters." "But what was it? Who was calling me?" Doesn't matter. You followed the rule. You stayed inside. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you need. Carver stood. The rule exists for a reason. Someone went outside during a gate event and disappeared. You didn't. You're here because you followed the rule. Kyle looked at me. Has this happened to you? I thought about lying. Then I said, no, I've never heard voices. So why did I? I don't know, but you did the right thing. He wasn't satisfied with that answer, but he didn't push further. Carver left and I handed the shift to Kyle. He took the keys and sat by the control board, still looking shaken. Just follow the rule, I said again. No matter what you hear or think you see, follow the rule. I left him alone. On March 1st, the authority closed Lock 17 for the overhaul. A crew of 8 engineers and technicians arrived with equipment trucks and a portable generator. They drained the lock chamber, exposing the concrete floor and the gate mechanisms. I was temporarily reassigned to Lock 22, 40 miles upriver. Different lock house, different river section, same overnight shift. Lock 22 had no unusual rules. The gates only opened when commercial traffic came through. I worked there for 2 weeks and slept through the night for the first time in months. On March 15th, I received a call from Halford. We're reopening Lock 17 tomorrow. You're back on midnight shift. Did they find anything during the overhaul? They found evidence of stress fractures in the upstream gate housing, micro cracks in the welds. They've reinforced everything, replaced the hydraulic lines, installed a new control system. Will that fix it? The engineers think so, but you don't. Halford was quiet for a moment. Just follow the rule, March. That's all any of us can do. I drove back to Lock 17 the next night. The lock house looked the same, but the lock chamber was cleaner. The concrete scrubbed and the gates repainted. All the monitoring equipment was still in place. The digital depth monitor, the alarm system, the emergency override switch. I started my shift at midnight. The depth gauge read 41 inches, the generator hummed. Everything was normal. At 02:34, the gate opened. I logged it and watched the gauges. The analog needle climbed to 43 inches. The digital display read 43.2. The gate stayed open for 29 minutes, then closed on its own. The overhaul hadn't changed anything. Kyle stopped showing up for his weekend shifts in early April. Carver told me the district office had reassigned him to dam inspections again, his original role. No one mentioned the voices he'd heard. A new relief operator named Torres took over weekends. He was older, maybe 50, and didn't ask many questions. I trained him for 2 nights and he handled the work competently. If he experienced anything unusual during gate events, he never mentioned it. By mid-April, the pattern had stabilized. The gate opened once or twice a week, usually between 0200 and 0400. Depth readings ranged from 43 to 48 inches. The alarm never triggered. The override switch was never needed. I stopped thinking about what caused it. I stopped wondering what would happen if the gate stayed open too long or if the depth exceeded 50 inches. I just followed the rule. On a Tuesday night in late April, I was sitting by the control board reading when I heard footsteps on the platform outside. Heavy boots on metal grating, definitely footsteps. I checked my watch. 03:14. The gate had been closed all night, no gate event in progress. The footsteps circled the lock house. I could track them by sound. Along the north side, around to the east, down the south side. They stopped at the door. I sat very still. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate. I didn't move. The rule said nothing about footsteps or knocks. The rule only addressed gate events. The knocks repeated, 3 more times. I stayed in my chair. The footsteps resumed, circling back around the lock house. They passed the window near the control board. I kept my eyes on the log sheet in front of me, not looking up. The footsteps faded. After 5 minutes of silence, I stood and walked to the window. The platform was empty. No person, no vehicle, no sign anyone had been there. I checked the exterior with the floodlights, scanning the entire area. Nothing. I logged it. 0314, footsteps on platform. No visual confirmation of personnel, possibly wildlife. At 8 a.m., I showed Carver the log. Footsteps, he said. Yes, sir. Circled the lockhouse, knocked on the door, but when I checked, no one was there. Did you open the door? No, sir. Good. He tapped the log entry. Could have been a raccoon or a bear. They make noise on the grating sometimes. It sounded like boots. Things sound different at night. He closed the binder. You followed protocol. Didn't engage with something you couldn't identify. That's the right call. I drove back to town thinking about the footsteps, about how precisely they'd match the cadence of human walking, about the 3 deliberate knocks. Things sound different at night. In May, the overnight temperatures rose above freezing consistently. The ice cleared from the river. The lock chamber dried out, the concrete bleaching white in the spring sun. The gate events continued, twice a week on average, depth readings between 43 and 48 inches. The pattern was so consistent I could almost predict when it would happen. Usually Tuesday or Thursday nights, almost always between 0200 and 0330. On a Thursday in mid-May, the gate opened at 0241. Standard event. Depth climbed to 46 inches and held steady. At 0305, while the gate was still open, I heard the footsteps again. This time, they didn't circle the lockhouse. They walked directly across the platform to the lock chamber. I heard them descend the metal stairs into the chamber itself. I stayed in my chair, watching the depth gauge. The footsteps echoed up from the chamber. Slow, methodical steps on wet concrete. They were walking the length of the chamber, from the upstream gate toward the downstream gate. The needle stayed at 46 inches. The footsteps reached the downstream gate, paused, then turned back. They walked the length of the chamber again, returning to the upstream gate. At 0323, the gate began to close. The footsteps stopped. By 0336, the gate was secure. Silence. I logged it. Gate event 0241 to 0336, peak depth 46 inches. Auditory anomaly during event, footsteps in chamber, no visual confirmation. Carver read it at shift change. Footsteps in the chamber while the gate was open, he said. Yes, sir. You didn't go look? No, sir. The rule says stay inside during gate events. Yes, sir. I followed the rule. He nodded. Good. But that night when I arrived for my shift, I found a handwritten note taped to the control board. If you hear footsteps during a gate event, do not investigate. Do not go outside. Do not look out the windows toward the chamber. Keep your attention on the depth gauge. Carver. It wasn't an official rule, just a note, but I followed it. The footsteps became regular. Once every week or two during a gate event, I'd hear them. Always the same pattern, crossing the platform, descending into the chamber, walking its length, then silence when the gate closed. I never looked. In late June, Torres radioed me on a Sunday morning, his weekend shift just ending. March, you there? I'm here. What do you need? Did Carver ever mention anything about voices? I felt my chest tighten. What kind of voices? During gate events. I heard someone calling my name last night. Multiple people, sounded like they were in the chamber. Did you go look? No. Stayed inside like the rule says, but it was clear as day. My name, over and over. You did right. Stay inside, watch the gauge, that's the job. But what is it? I don't know, but whatever it is, it can't reach you if you follow the rule. You sound pretty certain about that. I am certain. Follow the rule and you'll be fine. He signed off. I thought about calling Carver, telling him Torres had heard voices like Kyle had. But what would be the point? The rule was clear. As long as we followed it, we were safe. On a Monday night in July, the gate opened at 01:53, standard event. Depth climbed to 47 inches. At 02:20, I heard my name, not from outside, from inside the lockhouse. "March," a woman's voice, clear and close like someone standing right behind me. I kept my eyes on the depth gauge. "March, please." The voice was familiar. I couldn't place it immediately, but I knew I'd heard it before. "March, I need help." I recognized it then. My sister's voice. My sister, who lived 400 miles away and hadn't visited in 2 years. "Please, March, I'm outside. I'm lost. Please help me." The depth gauge read 47 inches. The gate was still open. I sat perfectly still. "March, why won't you answer? It's me. I drove up to see you. I got lost in the woods. Please come help me." The voice was coming from near the door, not outside on the platform, inside the lockhouse, maybe 10 feet away. "March, please, I'm scared." I focused on the needle, 47 inches, steady. "Fine. I'll just wait out here in the dark, alone. Thanks for nothing." The voice stopped. At 02:56, the gate closed. The depth dropped to 43 inches. I sat for another 10 minutes, breathing carefully. Then I stood and checked the entire lockhouse. No one else was inside. No way someone could have gotten in. The door had been locked from the inside all night. I radioed my sister on my personal phone after the shift ended. She answered on the third ring. "Hey, what's up? It's kind of early." "Just checking in. You doing okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Why?" "No reason. Talk to you later." I hung up. She was home, 400 miles away. She hadn't driven up to the lock. She hadn't been lost in the woods. I logged the event. Gate event 01:53 to 02:56. Peak depth 47 inches. Auditory anomaly voice inside lockhouse. No personnel present. When Carver arrived, he read the log and looked at me for a long moment. "Voice inside the lockhouse," he said. "Yes, sir, mimicking my sister." "Did you respond?" "No, sir. Kept my attention on the gauge." "Good." He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and wrote something, then taped it next to the first note on the control board. "If you hear voices during a gate event, especially voices of people you know, do not respond. Do not engage in conversation. Do not acknowledge the voice in any way. Keep your attention on the depth gauge. The voice is not who it claims to be." Carver. The voices continued through the summer. My sister, my mother, my ex-girlfriend. A friend from high school I hadn't spoken to in 10 years. Always during gate events, always calling my name, asking for help, trying to get me to respond or go outside. I never answered. Torres reported similar experiences. Voices of his daughter, his ex-wife, his father, who'd been dead for 15 years. "You get used to it," I told him during a shift handoff. "It's not real. Just keep watching the gauge." "How do you know it's not real?" "Because I called my sister after it happened. She was home. She'd never been here." "What if it's something else? Something that just sounds like her?" "Then it's even more important not to engage with it." He nodded, but he looked shaken. 2 weeks later, the district office reassigned him. A new relief operator named Chen took over weekends. She was quiet and professional and never mentioned hearing anything unusual. In August, Halford visited the lock in person. He arrived at 7:30 a.m., half an hour before the end of my shift, and sat with me in the lockhouse reviewing logs. "You've had 43 gate events in the past 6 months, he said. 18 of them exceeded 47 inches. But none have exceeded 49.8. That's correct. And you've documented auditory anomalies during 12 of these events. Footsteps, voices, other sounds. Yes, sir. But you've never actually seen anything. No, sir. I follow the rule. I stay inside and watch the gauge. Good. He closed the binder. The regional office has been reviewing all of this. They're satisfied with your performance. You're being given a pay increase, effective next month. Thank you. There's one other thing. He pulled out a new sheet of paper, this one printed on official authority letterhead. We're formalizing some of the additional protocols. These will be appended to the primary rule. He handed me the sheet. I read it. Lock 17 Supplemental Protocols. The following protocols apply during gate events. Upstream gate opening on its own between midnight and 6 a.m. 2. Remain inside the lock house at all times. Do not exit for any reason unless depth exceeds 50 inches and evacuation protocol is triggered. 3. Maintain visual contact with the depth gauge. Do not look out windows facing the lock chamber. 4. If you hear footsteps, voices, knocking, or other sounds during a gate event, do not investigate. Do not respond. Keep your attention on the depth gauge. 5. If you hear voices claiming to be people you know, do not engage in conversation. The voice is not who it claims to be. 6. If you observe movement through your peripheral vision during a gate event, do not turn to look directly at it. Keep your attention on the depth gauge. 7. If the radio produces audio during a gate event when no transmission is active, ignore it. Do not respond to any communication that does not use proper authority protocols. 8. Complete all logging requirements, but keep entries factual. Do not speculate about causes or sources of anomalies. These protocols are mandatory. Failure to comply may result in disciplinary action or termination. I read it twice. These are based on incident reports from multiple operators, Halford said, not just you. Kyle reported voices, Torres reported voices and shadowy movement. Chen hasn't reported anything yet, but she's only been here a month. What about the previous operator, before my time? He reported similar phenomena, more extreme in some cases. Halford stood. The point is, these experiences are documented and consistent. The supplemental protocols formalize the response. Do you know what causes it? No. Engineering has no explanation, but the pattern is clear. If operators follow the protocols, they're safe. If they don't, he gestured at the binders full of logs. Well, we know what happened to the one operator who tried to manually close the gate during an event. And you never found him? Never found him. His vehicle was here. His belongings were in the lock house. But he was gone. Halford picked up his briefcase. Just follow the protocols, March, that's all we ask. He left. I taped the new supplemental protocols to the wall next to Carver's handwritten notes. 7 rules now, in addition to the primary rule about not closing the gate. 8 rules total. I could follow 8 rules. September brought cooler weather and shorter days. The gate events continued twice a week. Depth readings stayed in the 45 to 48-inch range. I heard voices during about half the events now, not just my sister, but other people. Sometimes voices I recognized, sometimes voices I didn't. I never responded. On a Wednesday night in mid-September, the gate opened at 02:37. Depth climbed to 47 inches, everything normal. At 02:53, I saw movement in my peripheral vision. Something crossing the lock house, right to left, behind me. I kept my eyes on the depth gauge. Supplemental protocol number 5, don't turn to look. The movement crossed back, left to right. The depth gauge read 47 inches, steady. I heard footsteps inside the lock house. Not outside on the platform, inside, moving around the perimeter of the room. The footsteps circled me, slow, deliberate. Boots on concrete. I watched the needle. 47 inches, the footsteps stopped directly behind my chair, close enough that I could feel a presence there. Body heat, breathing. I didn't turn. The depth gauge held at 47 inches. At 03:19, the gate began to close. The presence behind me vanished instantly. The temperature in the lockhouse rose several degrees. I hadn't noticed it dropping until it came back. By 03:34, the gate was secure. I was alone. I logged it. Gate event 02:37 to 03:34. Peak depth 47 inches. Auditory and peripheral visual anomalies. Followed supplemental protocol 5, no direct observation. Carver read it at shift change and nodded. "You're doing good work," he said. "Some operators can't handle this part. They break. They look or they respond or they go outside. You haven't. The protocols are clear. Clear doesn't mean easy, but you're managing it." He poured coffee from his thermos. "You know what the hardest part is? What's that? Accepting that you'll never understand it. Most people need explanations. They need to know why. But this job doesn't work that way. You just follow the rules and accept that some things don't have explanations. I made peace with that months ago. I know. That's why you're still here." October marked 1 year since I'd started at Lock 17. The trees turned orange and red. The water temperature dropped. Ice began forming at the edges of the chamber during the coldest nights. The gate events increased in frequency. 3 times a week now, sometimes 4. Depth readings climbed higher. 48 inches became common. 49 inches happened twice in 1 week. The supplemental protocols proved necessary almost every time. Voices, footsteps, movement in peripheral vision. Presences standing close by. Cold spots in the lockhouse. The radio producing static or voices when no transmission was active. I followed every protocol exactly. Chen lasted until mid-October, then requested a transfer. She didn't give a reason, but I saw the relief shift logs before she left. She documented voices of her dead son, multiple times, calling for her from the lock chamber. A new relief operator named Garrett took over. He was ex-military, early 40s, calm and professional. He didn't seem bothered by the protocols. "I've seen stranger shit than this," he said during training. "At least these rules are straightforward." He worked weekends through October and November without incident, or at least without reporting incidents. The logs he filed were brief and factual. Gate events, depths, durations. Nothing about voices or movements. Either he wasn't experiencing the phenomena, or he was following Supplemental Protocol 7 and not speculating in his logs. In late November, the gate opened at 01:44 and stayed open for 157 minutes, the longest event on record. The depth climbed to 49.6 inches and held there for over an hour. I stood by the emergency override switch, my hand on the plastic cover, watching both gauges. The analog needle sat just below the red line. The digital display showed 49.6 in bright red numbers, 0.4 of an inch below the alarm threshold. The voices started at 02:30. My sister, my mother, friends from high school, ex-girlfriends, co-workers from the warehouse. All of them calling my name, pleading for help, saying they were lost outside or hurt or scared. I kept my eyes on the gauges, movement in my peripheral vision. Multiple presences now, not just one. Crossing the lockhouse, standing near the windows, circling my chair. The depth stayed at 49.6 inches. At 03:09, the radio crackled even though I wasn't transmitting. A voice came through, distorted and layered like multiple people speaking at once. "March, look at us. Turn around. We need you to see." I didn't respond. Supplemental Protocol 6. Ignore radio audio during gate events unless it uses proper authority protocols. The voice continued. "You can't stay inside forever. You can't hide. Look at us." The depth gauge needle trembled. Still 49.6. "Look at us. Look at us." At 04:21, the gate finally began to close. All the voices stopped instantly. The presences vanished. The temperature normalized. By 04:39, the gate was secure. Depth had dropped to 44 inches. I sat for a long time just breathing. My hands were shaking. I logged the event with precise detail, times, depths, duration. I noted the voices and movement, but didn't speculate. When Carver arrived at 8 a.m., he read the log twice. 157 minutes, he said. That's unprecedented. Yes, sir. And 49.6 inches for over an hour. Yes, sir. You didn't use the override. The gate closed on its own. The override is only for emergency if the gate doesn't close and depth exceeds 50 inches. That's right. He set the log down. This is escalating. I'm calling Halford today. We may need additional protocols. Or we need to shut down the lock, Carver looked at me. The lock serves a vital function. The authority won't shut it down unless there's an immediate safety threat. What would constitute an immediate safety threat? Depth exceeding 50 inches with the gate failing to close. Structural failure of the gates or chamber, actual physical danger to operators. He poured coffee. Everything else is manageable if protocols are followed. Even voices telling me to look at them. You didn't look. No. Then you managed it. I drove back to town thinking about those words. You managed it. As if management was the same as safety. As if following the protocols made everything okay. But I was still here. I was alive. Whatever was happening during gate events, it couldn't reach me if I followed the rules. That had to be enough. December brought the coldest weather yet. Temperatures dropped below zero most nights. The river steamed constantly. Ice formed thick along the banks. The gate events happened 4 or 5 times per week. Almost every shift now. Depth readings regularly exceeded 48 inches. Twice in 1 week, the depth hit 49.7 inches. The phenomena intensified. The voices became louder, more insistent. The presences more tangible. Several times I felt hands on my shoulders, not pushing or grabbing, just resting there. I didn't turn around. Garrett reported his first anomaly in early December. Voices during a gate event calling names he didn't recognize. He followed protocols and filed a factual log. The next week he reported footsteps in the chamber, then voices of people he knew. It's getting to him, Carver said during a day shift overlap. I can see it. He's following protocols. For now, but everyone has a breaking point. What was yours? Carver looked at me. I saw someone in the chamber once, during a gate event 7 years ago. I looked out the window even though I knew I shouldn't. There was a figure standing in the water right under the open gate. Just standing there, looking up at me. What did it look like? Like me, exactly like me. Same clothes, same face, it smiled and waved. He turned back to his coffee. I didn't go outside, I followed the rule, but I saw it. And now I know why the protocols say not to look. We sat in silence for a moment. Does it ever stop? I asked. The events, the phenomena, does it ever just stop? No. It's part of the lock now. Has been for at least a decade, maybe longer. The authority investigated years ago. They concluded the phenomena are connected to the gate malfunctions, but there's no scientific explanation. So they established protocols and kept the lock operational. Why not just close it permanently? Because this lock controls water levels for 800 square miles of watershed. Shutting it down would require rerouting an entire river system. That's not feasible. He stood. So we work the shifts, follow the protocols, and manage the situation. On December 19th, during a gate event that peaked at 49.8 inches, I heard a new voice. Carver's voice. March, I need you to come outside right now. I kept my eyes on the gauge. March, this is urgent. The gate's damaged. You need to help me secure it manually. The voice was perfect. Exact intonation, exact cadence. If I hadn't been looking at the clock 02:47 middle of my solo shift, I might have believed it. March, I'm out here. I need your help. Please. I didn't respond. God damn it, March, this is a direct order. Get out here now. The depth gauge read 49.8 inches. The gate was still open. Carver was at home, sleeping. Fine, I'll do it myself, but if something happens to me, it's on you. The voice stopped. At 03:33, the gate closed. I logged it. Voice mimicking Carver during gate event. Did not respond. Followed supplemental protocol 4. In the morning, I showed Carver the log before he asked. It used my voice, he said. Yes, sir. Told me to come outside and help with the gate. And you didn't. No, sir. He nodded slowly. It's learning, adapting. It knows how the authority works now. It knows supervisors give orders. What do? We add another protocol. He pulled out a sheet of paper and wrote, 9. If you hear a supervisor or authority personnel giving orders during a gate event, verify the transmission uses proper radio protocols and security codes before responding. If contact is made in person or via voice without radio confirmation, do not comply. Radio the district office to verify the contact is legitimate. He taped it with the others. 8 supplemental protocols now, plus the primary rule. 9 rules total. On Christmas Eve, I worked alone. The lockhouse was cold despite the heater running. Outside, snow fell steadily. The gate opened at 01:17. Depth climbed to 49.9 inches, 1/10 of an inch below the alarm threshold. I stood by the override switch, ready. The needle sat against the red line on the analog gauge. The digital display showed 49.9 in bright, pulsing red. The voices started immediately, not just 1 or 2, dozens. A choir of voices, all calling my name, all pleading and demanding and ordering, movement everywhere in my peripheral vision. The lockhouse felt crowded, packed with presences. The radio erupted with overlapping transmissions, none of them using proper protocols. Voices shouting, screaming, begging. Cold air pressed against me from all sides. The depth held at 49.9 inches. I focused on the needle, just the needle. Nothing else existed except that thin black line hovering at the edge of the red zone. The voices reached a crescendo, the presences pressed closer. Something touched my face, cold fingers tracing my cheek. I didn't move. At 03:46, the gate began to close. Everything stopped instantly, the voices cut off, the presences vanished, the temperature rose. The radio went silent. By 04:01, the gate was secure. Depth dropped to 43 inches. I sat down slowly. My legs were shaking. I'd been standing for 2.5 hours. I logged everything. Times, depths, phenomena, factual, precise, no speculation. At 8 a.m., Carver arrived and read the log. 49.9, he said quietly. Yes, sir. For 2.5 hours. Yes, sir. And you held. I followed the protocols. He looked at me for a long moment. Not everyone could do what you do, March. Most operators break eventually. They look, or they respond, or they run. But you hold the line. It's just following rules. It's more than that. It's discipline. It's trust in the system. He closed the log binder. The authority appreciates it. I drove back to town and slept 14 hours straight. Garrett stopped showing up for weekend shifts after Christmas. No explanation, no formal resignation. He just disappeared. The district office tried calling him for 3 days before giving up. They assigned a new relief operator named Lynn. She was young, maybe 25, and seemed confident during training. I've read all the protocols, she said. I understand what happens here. Reading isn't the same as experiencing. I know. But I'm ready. She worked her first solo weekend in early January. On Monday morning, I found her sitting in her car in the parking area, still there 2 hours after her shift should have ended. I knocked on the window. She startled, then rolled it down. Are you okay? I asked. I heard my daughter. She's 4 years old. I heard her calling for me from the chamber. Her eyes were red. I almost went outside. But you didn't. No. I followed the protocols, but Jesus Christ, it sounded exactly like her. It wasn't her. I know that now, but in the moment, she started the car. I don't know if I can do this. She worked one more weekend, then requested a transfer. The district office approved it. After that, Garrett's weekend shifts went unfilled. I started working 7 days a week, midnight to 8 a.m., every night. The overtime pay was substantial, and honestly, it was easier than spending my days off thinking about what happened at the lock. By late January, the gate events were happening every night, sometimes twice per night. Depth readings exceeded 49.5 inches regularly. The phenomena were constant and intense. Voices, presences, movement, cold spots, radio interference. Every protocol was necessary, every shift. I moved into the lockhouse full-time. There was no point driving back to town anymore. I slept in the upstairs bunk during the day, worked the overnight shift, and repeated. Carver worked days, I worked nights. We saw each other at shift change and rarely spoke. One morning in early February, Halford visited again. "You've been working 7 nights a week for 6 weeks, he said. "Yes, sir." "No relief operator available." "We're trying to fill the position, but given the documented phenomena, it's been difficult to find qualified candidates." "I can handle it." "I can see that, but working 7 nights a week isn't sustainable long-term." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "The regional office is impressed with your performance. They're offering you a promotion to senior operator with a significant pay increase. You'd stay here at Lock 17 and train new relief operators when we find them." "What about Carver?" "Carver's retiring end of March. He's been here 9 years. That's longer than most." Halford slid the paperwork across the desk. "If you accept, you'd be the primary operator. You'd work nights, train relief operators, and report directly to me." I looked at the contract. The pay was nearly triple what I'd been making. "What if we can't find relief operators?" "We'll keep trying, but you'd have the authority to adjust schedules as needed. Work 7 nights if you want, or we can close the lock temporarily on weekends until we fill the position." I signed the paperwork. "Good," Halford said. "Official start date is April 1st. Until then, keep doing what you're doing." Carver's last night was March 31st. We overlapped shifts for an hour, standing on the platform watching the river. 9 years, he said. "That's a long time." "You're ready to leave?" "I've been ready for 3 years. But someone had to work the days and I was good at it." He turned to me. "You'll be good at it too. Better than me, probably. You have the discipline. What will you do?" "Move somewhere warm, buy a small house. Sleep through the night for the first time in 9 years." He smiled slightly. "Maybe forget about this place." "You think you can forget?" "No. But I can try." He checked his watch. "Your shift starts in 40 minutes. I'll be gone before you start. The keys are on the desk. All the logs are current." He walked to his truck, got in, and drove away. I watched until the taillights disappeared into the trees. At midnight, I started my first shift as senior operator. April passed, then May. I worked every night, 7 days a week. The gate events happened every night without fail, usually twice. Depth readings peaked at 49.9 inches almost every time. The phenomena were overwhelming now. Not just voices and presences, but physical sensations. Hands touching my face, my shoulders, my arms. Cold breath on my neck, weight pressing down on me. The lockhouse felt crowded with invisible bodies. I followed all 9 protocols exactly. I never looked. I never responded. I never went outside during a gate event. The override switch remained untouched. The gate always closed on its own eventually. The district office sent 3 potential relief operators in May and June. All 3 washed out during training. One lasted 2 nights before requesting a transfer. One lasted 4 nights. One had a panic attack during his 3rd gate event and left without filing paperwork. In July, Halford visited. "We're suspending the search for relief operators," he said. "The regional office has determined that Lock 17 requires an operator with specific psychological qualifications. That's you. So I work 7 nights indefinitely? You'll get scheduled breaks. We can close the lock for 2 weeks twice a year for mandatory maintenance. You'll have those weeks off. And the rest of the time? You work." I nodded. It was fine. I didn't have anywhere else to be. On a Tuesday in August, the gate opened at 01:23 and stayed open for 4 hours and 17 minutes. The depth hit 50 inches at 03:45. The alarm triggered. The piercing tone filled the lockhouse. The digital display flashed red. 50.0. I grabbed the radio. "Lock 17 to district office, evacuation protocol. Depth has exceeded 50 inches. Gate still open, requesting instructions." Static. "Lock 17 to district office, acknowledge. Emergency evacuation protocol initiated." More static, then, "We're here, March. Come outside, come see." Not the district office, not proper radio protocols. I tried again. "Lock 17 to district office on channel 9. Emergency evacuation required, acknowledge." The radio hissed. Then a voice I knew, Halford's voice, but wrong somehow. "Acknowledged, Lock 17. Evacuate immediately. Do not use the override. Exit the lockhouse and proceed to your vehicle." I checked the display again. 50.1 inches now, rising. The emergency override switch was right there. Flip it and the gate would close. Maybe. But the protocols said only use it if the gate doesn't close on its own. And every time, no matter how long it took, the gate had closed on its own. 50.2 inches. The voices were screaming now. The lockhouse was full of presences pressing against me from all sides. The temperature had dropped 30 degrees. I could see my breath. 50.3 inches. I kept my hand away from the override switch. The gate would close. It always closed. 50.4 inches. At 05:40, the gate began to close. The alarm kept blaring until the depth dropped below 50 inches at 05:52. Then silence. By 06:08, the gate was secure. Depth had dropped to 44 inches. I sat down and tried the radio again. "Lock 17 to district office. Emergency resolved. Gate closed. Depth returning to normal range." This time, Halford's actual voice came through using proper protocols. "Copy Lock 17. We received your initial emergency call but lost radio contact. Please confirm situation is stable." "Situation is stable. Gate closed at 05:40. Depth currently 44 inches and falling." Acknowledged. "Stand by for debriefing at shift change." The rest of the shift was quiet. At 8 a.m., Halford arrived with 2 engineers. "Depth exceeded 50 inches, Halford said, reading my log. "Yes, sir. Hit 50.4 before the gate closed." "But you didn't evacuate." "I tried to radio for instructions, got interference. Decided to wait and see if the gate would close on its own, per standard pattern." "And it did?" "Yes, sir." One of the engineers, Kowalski, who I recognized from previous visits, studied the data logs from the monitoring equipment. Depth spiked to 50.4 at 05:39, then began dropping when the gate started closing at 05:40. Self-regulation like we've theorized. "So the system works," I said. "After a fashion." Kowalski closed his laptop. "But this is the first time we've confirmed the system can exceed 50 inches and still self-correct. That's valuable data." "Valuable data?" I repeated. "I was ready to evacuate." "But you didn't need to." The system corrected itself. He packed up his equipment. We'll analyze this further, but preliminary assessment is that your decision to wait was correct. They left. I went upstairs and tried to sleep, but couldn't. September now. I've been here almost 2 years. The gate opens every night, multiple times per night. Depth regularly exceeds 49 inches. The phenomena are constant voices, presences, physical contact, cold, radio interference. I follow all 9 protocols. I never break, I never look, I never respond. The emergency override switch has never been used. Last week, the gate stayed open for 6 hours. Depth peaked at 50.7 inches. The alarm screamed for over 2 hours. The gate closed on its own at 07:11, 17 minutes before Halford arrived for the scheduled debriefing. He stopped asking if I'm okay. He knows the answer. I'm functional. I follow the protocols. That's all that matters. Today is September 15th. My shift starts in 3 hours. I'm sitting in the lockhouse writing this during the day because I need to document what's happening while I can still think clearly during daylight. Tonight will be another gate event, maybe 2. The depth will climb. The voices will call. The presences will press close. I'll follow the protocols and wait for the gate to close. Tomorrow night will be the same. And the night after that. I don't know what opens the gate. I don't know what causes the phenomena. I don't know why the system always self-corrects or what would happen if it didn't. I don't need to know. There's one rule. If the upstream gate opens on its own between midnight and 6 a.m., do not close it. Everything else is just procedure. I can follow procedures. I'm writing this because the district office asked me to prepare training materials for the next operator. They've identified someone they think might be suitable. Former military, extensive psychological screening, experience with isolation posts. His name is Wade. He starts training next month. I need to prepare a clean list of rules for him. Something comprehensive but manageable. Here's what I'll give him. Primary rule. If the upstream gate opens on its own between midnight and 6:01 a.m., do not attempt to close it manually. Monitor the water level. If depth exceeds 50 inches and the gate does not begin closing within 10 minutes, evacuate to your vehicle and radio for instructions. Supplemental protocols. 1. Remain inside the lockhouse during gate events. Do not exit for any reason unless evacuation is necessary. 2. Maintain visual contact with the depth gauge during gate events. Do not look out windows facing the lock chamber. 3. If you hear footsteps, voices knocking, or other sounds during gate events, do not investigate or respond. 4. If you hear voices claiming to be people you know, do not engage. The voice is not who it claims to be. 5. If you observe movement in your peripheral vision during gate events, do not turn to look directly at it. 6. If the radio produces audio during gate events without proper authority protocols, ignore it. Do not respond. 7. If you hear supervisors or authority personnel giving orders during gate events, verify via proper radio channels before complying. 8. Complete all logging requirements factually. Do not speculate about causes. 9. Trust the system. The gate will close on its own. I'll give Wade these rules. I'll train him for however many nights he can manage. I'll show him how to watch the gauge, how to ignore the voices, how to sit still while presences circle him in the dark. And if he breaks, like all the others, I'll keep working alone. Because someone has to staff the lock at midnight. Someone has to follow the rules, and I'm very good at following rules.